All right, we have another one of those support weekend questions, so make sure you read that, make sure you know that you need to support it. But again, there's going to be a lot of detail in the passage, but it's really when we get to the student's assertion that we have to pay the most attention. So it's okay if you don't understand everything as you're reading the first half or so. Fish whose DNA has been modified to include genetic material from other species are known as transgenic. Some transgenic fish have genes from jellyfish that result in fluorescence, that is, they glow in the dark. Although these fish were initially engineered for research purposes in the 1990s, they were sold as pets in the 2000s and can now be found in the wild in creeks in Brazil. A student in a biology seminar who is writing a paper on these fish asserts that their escape from Brazilian fish farms into the wild may have significant negative long-term ecological effects. So fish, bad. That's my dumb summary. Right? So which quotation from a researcher would support the student's assertion, right? So there's a lot of information about the background of the fish and what it means to be transgenic, but that is not as important as the end piece where we get an actual connotation that we're going to want to refer back to. So let's see, fish bad. Let's see if we can support that. A, in one site in the wild where transgenic fish were observed, females outnumbered males, while in another, the numbers of females and males were equivalent. I genuinely don't know if the gender dispersion of the fish is good or bad, right? There's no connotation to that. That just seems like a statement of fact, right? That's very neutral. So I don't know, maybe I leave it. Maybe I'm supposed to interpret something there, but I also don't remember them talking about males and females. That didn't seem to matter. So this just seems random. B, though some presence of transgenic fish in the wild has been recorded, there are insufficient studies of the impact of those fish on the ecosystems in which they are introduced. Well, insufficient studies makes it seem like we don't know. Right, so again, we want to say that it's bad. Right now, this choice seems to be saying we don't know if it's good or bad. We don't know anything. We haven't had enough studies. So this seems wrong to me. C, the ecosystems into which transgenic fish are known to have been introduced may represent a subset of the ecosystems into which the fish have actually been introduced. What? If you're confused there, it's basically saying nothing at all. It's just saying like, basically what they mean is we've released the fish and we know that they're in some rivers, but there might be other rivers that we don't know they're in. Meaning the rivers that we know they're in is a subset, is a smaller list of all the rivers that they're probably in. We just haven't found them yet. So this is just, I don't even know if this is good or bad. This just means that there might be more fish out there. Again, it doesn't say that the fish are good or bad. So whether there's more or less of them, doesn't seem to interest me. Probably it's going to be D, but let's take a look. Through interbreeding, transgenic fish might introduce the trait of fluorescence into wild fish populations, making those populations more vulnerable to predators. Well, if you're going to get eaten, if you're vulnerable to predators, that seems bad, right? So here's our connotation. Here's what we wanted. That's definitely it. So I didn't think A was going to be it, but I kept it in because maybe there's some interpretation of the males and females that I need to do. But notice that I didn't bother doing it at the time. I think there's a big mistake some people make that costs a lot of time on these questions, is when they get an answer that doesn't quite fit, they spend a lot of time being like, well, maybe it's this, what if that? And they come up with a little story in their head and they kind of like try to force the answer choice in before they really need to, right? If it doesn't have an obvious kind of like connection, you can leave it in the mix and not cross it out, but don't waste your time coming up with that imaginary story to make it fit. Look at the other choices. If something else fits more naturally, just do that, right? That's the better answer. So you're wasting time wondering and looking back and reading back about the males and the females in this case, just for the sake of what? Trying to make a wrong answer seem more right? Like, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're not approaching this in the good way. Just if it kind of seems related and you're not sure, put it aside, look at everything else, and then hopefully something else will just be way more obviously related. And then that's your answer. You don't need to go back to the bad one. So it's something that bothers me. A lot of students do that because they just can't let go. They assume if they don't understand something, then they're lost. But just keep reading. You might understand more than you think.